And we're live. It is 6:58. I'm a couple minutes early tonight. So make sure to stay hydrated. Frosty cold beverage. Tonight we're talking about all motor combinations versus boost. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, Richard, that's not really a fair competition because a boosted motor is an all motor, but with extra stuff on it. The question really is, I'm sure everybody has seen it. Everybody has seen the promos for the 670 horsepower new Z06 Corvette, the all motor, flat crank that all the flat crank guys have been asking for, which is all cool. It's awesome that they have such a high specific output, and it's an all motor deal. It's a flat crank. It's going to sound awesome. It's going to make the Corvette, supercar-ish, although it kind of already is anyway. If you've ever seen, I know Brian Tooley has one of the, I think this is a 19 supercharged version with like 1 million horsepower, and it's very cool. It's very technological. It has cameras all over. It's got all kinds of very cool stuff. But my question is for tonight, and I want you guys to let me know, we know that the new motor is promising very big power, 670 horsepower. That's quite a bit of NA power output. It's got a lot of RPM. What typically happens with high specific output motors is they make their power at a very high RPM. What that normally means is down low, they're soft, unless you have other things that help that along. Compression helps that. Variable intake runner helps that. Variable cam timing helps that. Boost helps that a lot. and so that's my question is, how do you think that this version will compare to the previous supercharged versions that had similar power output? As a matter of fact, I think the 19 car had more power than that. It was in the 700s, I think, if I remember right. But, or do we think that this is just the introductory version and that later on they will come out with a supercharged version that will be head and shoulders above where this one is? Maybe it will be another 200 horsepower above this kind of thing. But I would think that they wouldn't do it with, and let me know what you guys think, I would think that GM wouldn't do a high RPM, small displacement, flat plane crank with a blower on it to make big power. I mean, it would be awesome because that's kind of a cool combination. But or twin turbos on it. But I don't think that they'll do that. And I think that they won't do that only because of expense. I mean, there's no reason to do that. They've already seen that, mid 700 horsepower stuff is fairly easy with, boost and something in the, 6 liter, 6.2 liter displacement. And you can do it with direct injection. You can do it with variable cam timing. You can do it with lots of cool stuff to make it pretty impressive. So if you look at the success of the Dodge stuff, of the Demon stuff, and the Hellcat stuff, big numbers are, especially for the engineers at that level, at the OEM level, they've got a lot of head flow. So cam timing and head flow, displacement, boost, it's not a real complicated thing. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the engineers because they're very, very sharp guys, a lot more than people in the aftermarket tend to give them credit for. Oh, look, it's so much easier to make a lot more power. I know, but if they wanted to do that, they could. If they had a competition between you and them, they would make more power because they're really, really sharp people. But the point is that they have a lot of other things that they have to do, emissions and mileage and longevity, and they have to have minimum warranty claims, cost, all kinds of things that most of us don't have to do. I just like the fact that they made the LS with lots of extra power left, so we could go to the wrecking yard and get that kind of stuff. It'll be interesting to see what happens down the line when some of these more, and we're seeing this a little bit already with the LT stuff. Guys are making power with it, and just as they adopted fuel injection over carburetors and they adopted the LS stuff over the conventional small block and the LT stuff, I think we'll see that with the LT, the next generation of LT stuff. And the problem is that things get more and more expensive when you do that. So like with an LT motor, there's lots of potential there. It has enough displacement and compression, and has enough head flow. Put a camshaft in it. Brian Tooley's already shown that even in the little run-of-the-mill L83, you can make mid 500 horsepower stuff with that fairly easily. But the thing is, the fuel system on those are very expensive. The bigger injectors and pumps and all of that stuff gets to be fairly pricey. Guys are converting them over to run on just port injection. But I think we lose some of what makes that motor really impressive and effective when we do that and converting it into a port motor. I think that the DI guys are going to look at guys converting LT stuff, and let me know what you guys think. But I think LT guys converting it are going to look at guys that are converting it backward into port injection are going to be looked at the same way EFI guys look at carburetor guys. So we'll have that same kind of like infighting. Oh, you guys are turning a direct injected motor into a toilet motor, just like they say about the carbureted stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if that transpires. Maybe I need to start the website to get that going so that people will actually start that argument, and then I can say that I created all of that. So it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, I like that idea. The flat plane crank is going to sound very cool, which they can do a lot of that with exhaust anyway. But it should sound cool. It'll be NA. It's high compression. So it's got to have enough camshaft to make power at that RPM range. So we know that it has lots of camshaft in it because it has to. It's going to be cool. But I just wonder what a new Corvette guy, a new NA Corvette guy, how he's going to feel when he goes out and gets just worked over by a guy that has a previous generation with a blower on it. Especially the 2019 deals, the Z01 deal. Yeah, and somebody pointed out that the Z01 has both port injection and direct injection, and it does, and that works very well. But it'll be interesting to see. And I know that the Z01 was even more of a specialty version, although this is a Z06. So again, it makes me wonder what they're going to do for the other upgraded versions. Like, what do they have? They already have all of this stuff planned. So they know what the introduction of this one's going to be. Hey, look, this is so awesome. Just like when they introduced the LT2, I guess, in the standard Corvette. And then all of the subsequent upgraded versions of that. So I think we'll see the same thing. It'll just be interesting to see if they don't go flat plane and don't go small displacement, or if they go to small displacement and keep it turbocharged, or add turbos to it, or add a blower, or what they do. It'll be kind of cool to see what happens. And I like all of the new stuff, and I'd like to see what they're doing, and like to keep abreast of that stuff. Obviously, most of my stuff is junkyard, but the new stuff is cool to read about. I'll never have one of those Corvettes, I don't think. So the video I'm working on now is the big block version of the power adder stuff, and it's kind of cool. And I'm really seriously thinking about putting one of the combinations in the Nova to give it away. And the reason for that is because it's what I think a lot of people should do and would do. And it's just a Gen 6 wrecking yard motor with a carburetor and a dual plane and a distributor and a nitrous plate on it. And it makes 520 or something with a little NOS sniper kit on it. And, it makes 650 foot-pounds. And if you hit it earlier than that, it's going to make quite a bit more. Because I think we hit this thing at 3,500 or 4,000 or something. Because this thing only makes peak power. It only runs out to 5,000 RPM or something. It doesn't have a lot of RPM potential with a stock camshaft in it, because it's kind of a waste of time. It's not really making any power. It's falling off there. But what I wonder, and I was going to ask you guys, there's drag racers out there, so I probably know. Excuse me. If you had a big block that made that kind of power, and is that a 10-second car? In a Nova, a 72 with a turbo 400 in it. Assume not a pull the wheels kind of 60 foot time, like a 1.7 or 1.8 or something. I'm sure that you could get that thing to do fairly easy. Yeah, the Corvette should sound like a Ferrari V8, and I know a little bit about that. Yeah, the DI motors do have carbon buildup on the back of the valves. That's probably one of the reasons that GM in their LT5 did both port and direct injection, but I think it was also for power and charge cooling. Saul, a bell mouth doesn't dampen the reflected wave. What it does is, depending on the angle of the radius, it starts the reflected wave either earlier or later, depending on how you shape that bell mouth. Because if the bell mouth opens up, the reflected wave is not going to start at basically the end or the top of the bell mouth. It's going to start earlier than that because it thinks it's already going out into the open plenum. And so effectively what a radius bell mouth does is shorten the intake runner length. I don't have any information on the GM crate motor. It's over 1,000 horsepower. It's a 632. It's an NA motor. It's fuel injected. I've only seen what the press releases have released on them. Bell mouth and taper quench the intensity of the reflected wave. They're not going to change the intensity of the reflected wave at all. They're going to change the initiation time. They're going to, like I said, it's a bell mouth is going to change the effective length of the runner, and then that's going to change when rarefication occurs, and then, but it's not going to change the intensity of the wave that's traveling up and back. What are the benefits of 2 turbos versus 1? There's no benefit. Usually twin versus single is it's just a function of packaging, and you can have 2 turbos sized so they do exactly the same thing and flow exactly the same amount, both on the hot side and the cold side, as a single. So there's no benefit there. You can have them be small and spool up quick. You can have the single be small and spool up quick. You can have them both be big, have the single be really big. You can do either thing that you want with singles or twins. Jared, what's the limit you feel on a one-piece rear main 880 small block Chevy? I don't know what that limit is. I know that we've run some stuff that's over 800 horsepower on stock blocks. So you had a 78 Cutlass that had around 600 horsepower, ran 10s. I know that, I was thinking back on the Fox chassis stuff that we ran with the turbo, and you guys have seen photos of it, and it had an HP performance kit on it. And I'm thinking that it made less than 600 at the tire. It was like 550 at the tire. And that car was a 10.0 car. So they were trying to get it into the 9s, but unfortunately they had a T5 and they kept not having the T5s hold up. So I'm thinking that and then if it didn't get in the 10s, I think that kind of thing would go 1090s if I had the right gear and the tire and stuff. Richard, the Coyote must be more efficient than the LS 5.3. So you're comparing a truck motor to the Mustang Coyote engine? The Coyote certainly makes more power for its displacement compared to the truck motor. The Lexus V8 is both DI and port injection. I think that's a good combination. I think both from a charge cooling and a cleaning standpoint, that's definitely the way to go. The thing that I like about twin turbos is that you can say you have a twin turbo whatever. Because if you say you have, like back in the day, if you go back to when turbocharging was new and really cool and unique, if you had a turbo Porsche, that was cool. But if it was a twin turbo one, that was like super cool. I don't know what the flat plane crank brings to the table. I don't think having a flat plane crank allows it to RPM any better. It definitely sounds good, but there are inherent vibrations that are problematic, that make that problematic, that you have to fix, and they have to spend a lot of time doing that. Ford found that out with their Mustang, with their GT500, and Ferrari had been working with it for a long time. Titanium rods. My Acura NSX had titanium rods in it from the factory. Grant, Richard, off topic for just a second. You can ask whatever questions you guys want. It doesn't have to be about the subject. I just start with that subject, and then we can get into whatever. What does it recommend to install short travel lifters? 250, 285, 292, 560 lift. Is the 285 and 292 an advertised duration? And the short travel lifter is going to be more of a function of RPM, and that doesn't sound like, if those are numbers, if those are advertised numbers, that doesn't sound like a really big camshaft. Jared, 11-1, 383 AFR comp head, 600 lift, 248, 254. BS Racing. I don't know what the block will hold. I don't have any idea. I'm assuming that it's a full forged rotating assembly. I think it's probably strong enough. Rich, what do you 350 rear wheel horsepower NA or boost on a V6? Because of the limitations on the V6, usually with the availability of camshafts and aftermarket heads and aftermarket intakes and stuff, boost is really the way to go. Even on a Honda, which typically has a lot of aftermarket support, but even a a 3.5 or a 3.2 or the newer 3.7, the J series stuff, I still would go boost on it. Travis, LQ4 intake manifold, factory intake. I wouldn't. Is this an EFI, Travis, that I missed what you were talking about beforehand? The factory intake works very well. It works better than the Holley stuff unless you're going to run a lot of engine speed. 597 and 598 at the tires is a lot more than 520 horsepower at the flywheel. This would be more like 420 horsepower at the wheels. Marcus, what do you think about this cam for boost? I don't even have to look at the specs, and I just say, yes, it will work under boost. Now let's look at the specs. 219, 223, that's fine. 61X, 59X. So they don't want to tell you what the lift actually is. Not that that last decimal point actually matters. It doesn't do anything. That will work fine under boost. Jason, does somebody know if the F-150 is the firing order different in that motor? I think I asked that last night too. Andy, who has the record for the highest revving LS engines? The guys that did what's his name? What did EFI University do? Was theirs an LS motor? I don't think it was. The guys from Sam I know were going into 5-digit stuff. Theirs was at least 10,000, and I think it was more than that for some of their drag race motors. So you think the new Z06 5.5 liter will be the best crate motor around? Rob, very little information about the LC8 LS 2014 6-liter. I'm actually not familiar with that. 2014 should already be a LT motor, right? But is it like a 6-liter truck motor then? Is it a LY6 kind of variant, I would imagine? Is work hardening even an issue? Well, if you hit them with a hammer, it is. $11 billion. I like that. It's like $1.289. Travis, I like getting the lift from the cam and not the rocker. There are times when a rocker might work better, but and I don't mean better. I just mean it might be necessary to do that, but not on an LS or small block Chevy or big block Chevy or Dodge or anything. Recommended books on turbo 4-cylinders like the Turbo Era or something similar. That's the only one I know of. Corky Bell has a fairly good book on turbocharging if you want to go into some of the ins and outs and stuff. The truck Coyote has the Mustang firing order. Okay. Ben Straight. That's who it is. Ben Strader. I've met Ben and we've spoken a number of times. As a matter of fact, he ported a set of Honda or a Honda B series head for me way back before he started any of the stuff that he's doing now. Justin's 1951 Henry J twin turbo. Welcome. Yeah, the Project Spinal Tap. But was it an LS though? Because that's the highest RPM I've seen on stuff. John, small block Chevy 350, late 80s motor. Okay. Cindy Lauper style. Forward 30 over, forge rotating assembly. What do you think this block can handle and boost? I don't know. I don't know what the limit of the block is. We know what it is for. I would almost guarantee that a small block Chevy block will not do what an LS block does. I don't see how it can. Oh, so the LC8 6-liter is a like a flex fuel deal though, right? Which is better for boost. There's no better. They both will take boost. Although I've heard are you talking about the 426, like the Gen 2 Hemi, or a 426 stroker Gen 3 or 4 Hemi, depending on how you look at it? What is the power and torque record in your opinion for stock short L36 with standard? What is an L36? L33 maybe? Tuning auto trans versus manual trans. Well, you don't have to tune anything in the manual trans. So the tuning is just the engine. If you have an automatic trans, and especially if it's computer controlled, which it's going to be, then you have a lot more tuning with the automatic. Adam, if you're only running 6,500 RPM, I wouldn't worry about a short travel lifter. We run standard travel lifters way beyond that. Travis, an LQ4, just put a cam and springs in it, man, and a turbo, and you'll be on your way. People put aluminum rods in street cars. He said, I don't know why you would do that. I knew that they still had a 6-liter, and I thought that maybe even the 6-liter, they continued the 6-liter cathedral port head motor in trucks for a long time after they introduced the rec port stuff. So maybe that's the one you're talking about. Jamie, a buddy of mine's building a 2.4-liter Honda VVT motor for dirt track, 400 horsepower methanol. Is this achievable without exotic cylinder heads and intake? I don't know what you mean by exotic. The factory ported heads will easily make 400. And I think that if you talk to the guys from Skunk, their drag race cars are at least making that much. Kenneth, just tell me the power output that you want. That's going to determine what turbo you're going to use. If you're only looking at 1,000 horsepower, like a 78, 75 or something like that, or a VS Racing, so yeah, 78, 75 Gen 2 or an S475 or even an S480, I wouldn't put a stage 3 cam in it. You could put something smaller in it. Surfside, I think it does. I think filling the block adds strength, but as you do that, it decreases street ability. I think it becomes more of a race motor. Have you ever tested a boosted Ford modular Triton V10? I have not. I've never even run one of those. Joseph, you want to get 300 horsepower on a 283? That usually takes a fair bit of cam timing and RPM because they just, a 283 is fairly small. But good heads go a long way. So you're going to have to look at something like the head that we use on the 305, that aluminum trick flow 175 head, the Super 23. The Ford V10 is not a high RPM motor. We don't, Travis, we don't normally change the bearings. LS, all the things. Take a look at the head test that I did, the video on the head test. The 243 certainly flows more, but a cammed 5.7, yeah, the 243 head's definitely going to be better than a 241. The 241 makes more power than the 317, but less than the 706 and less than the 243 799. I know only 1,000 horsepower, but that's where everybody looks at 4-digit stuff. Paulster, thanks, man. How much power would a M122? I'm thinking that that's going to be like a I think it's like a 700 horsepower supercharger. Yeah, Kenneth, then you're right at the S475 range. Racer D, I've actually never filled the block to try to improve the strength on any of the things that we've done. I mean, we're usually trying to find the limit, like in the Big Bang stuff, we're trying to find the limit of what the stock stuff is. So I've never done that because I've never built a dedicated race motor. I mean, I built stuff for Bonneville, but it's never been filled. Snowblower mods. Sharpen the blades. That's actually a good question. Adrian, have you ever seen any power losses from running a plug that's too cold? And I have not. We've run, heat range 10s on very low compression NA motors before we put boost on them. And then we run that cold plug in boost, especially if you're going to run a lot of boost. We'll put a 31 IQ 31 Denso in it. And I haven't ever seen a problem with misfiring or anything. I've even driven around. I know that they were at least 9s. I'm thinking that they were 10s. I think that they were IQ 31s in my Civic, and just drove it around all day. I mean, every day before we took it to Bonneville, and I didn't have any problem with it. Brian, will a single nozzle NOS with the 4640 pills do the same power as a plate system? I think it will. The thing you'd have to be concerned with is if you're doing a single wet fogger, what are you blowing that into? Are you blowing it into a long runner EFI manifold where distribution might be an issue? Whereas a plate system is blowing it into either a dual plane or single plane. They'll both work. The distribution would be the thing I would be concerned about. But the amount of nitrous that you're sending in there is the same, so it has the same power potential. Zach, I think you can run at 100 horsepower for a long time, as long as the tune's right. Yes, 1,000 horsepower is the new 500. But we forget about how much power 500 is. That's why when I was looking at the big block, the results of the big block nitrous deal, I thought, you know what? That thing makes 500 horsepower and over 650 foot-pounds. And I drove my Mustang around forever with a Vortec on the 302, and it didn't make that much power. So, and I remember how much fun it was. Daniel, thanks for everything. What compression ratio or cylinder pressure should you see with correct ring gap on a light tuned turbo 4.8? I don't understand the question. Are you talking about what compression should you run, or what cylinder pressure should you run? There's no right cylinder pressure, because the cylinder pressure is going to be a function of the static compression plus the camshaft, the dynamic compression, and then how fast you're cranking it over and stuff. So if you're taking a cranking compression reading, there are things that will affect that. We put ring gap in any motor that we're going to run boost on. Almost any motor. Sometimes I've not done that. Devin, you can build almost any motor to run the very, very high boost levels if that's what you want to do. The reason that the guys with the V8s typically run less boost is because they achieve the power output that they need, because they're starting with so much more power NA. Cole, I don't know when you would determine to go from one of those to the other. I would pick the Turbo 400 only because it would be less expensive for me to run that behind, because I could get a junkyard one. And I don't want to have a computer controlled one. I'm reading an article on the pressure of reflected waves at the valve of experimental intakes. The more total taper. So well, now you're talking about the taper of the runner and not the radius entry at the beginning of the runner. So those are different things. I wish I was sponsored by Briggs and Stratton. And if you have taper in the runner, that's affecting more than the reflected wave. It's also affecting inertial ram, which will demonstrate and manifest itself as pressure at the valve. Will the factory trans work? I'm not a trans guy, so I don't know about the combination. Anyone know the RPP Mustang from Missouri? I don't. I'm not familiar with that. Do cams that keep the valve closed longer actually help your engine run cooler under boost? So when you say run cooler, are you talking about the exhaust gas temperature or the actual coolant in the motor, like the water temperature or the head temperature? What size intercooler piping should I run? Street sheet metal intake with 102 millimeter throttle body. The intercooler piping can be smaller than the throttle body, but a lot of times we'll just try to match the throttle body size. So on a 102 millimeter deal, we might run a 3.5 or 4 inch tubing going to it. It's easier for silicone couplers, but sometimes we'll go from a 3.5 to a 4, and we'll just have the reducer coupler or the stepper upper or stepper downer coupler from the throttle body. The problem with 102 millimeter throttle bodies is that they're not 4 inches outside diameter. They're not 4.5 either. They're like 4.25. On a small block Chevy, like everything else, the RPM potential is limited by valve train first. What I haven't seen Rob's new video. I'll need to have to take a look at it. The biggest surprise I got on the dyno was the 4.8, was the 5.3. The motor I thought was a 5.3 turning out to be a 4.8. And looking back now, I should have realized it given how much power it made and where it made power. But I really didn't know until we tore it apart. I've been searching the web for the Truck Norris cam with no luck. So did you just go to the Brian Tooley website, because they have that Truck Norris cam? The Truck Norris cam will work under boost. If you're trying to do that, don't just try to go get a cheap one that has similar specs. Just go get that cam. If you guys haven't watched, if you want to see reflected waves actually in action so you can understand what they're doing, what's happening, is do a search, and I think that it's on. It's got to be on YouTube. It has to be for the video that John Kazi did. He did a presentation at Engine Masters where he made a clear intake manifold and stuck his finger in there, and so you could see his finger going just vibrating as these reflected waves go up and down. People don't realize, they think that when they go to wide open throttle that it's just airflow going into the tube, but that's not what's happening at all. People don't understand reflected waves. When I tell them, hey, there's a pressure wave that goes up and expands out, and it goes as a negative pressure wave, then it goes back and goes down as a positive pressure wave, people have they have a really hard time like conceptualizing that. But this video shows you exactly what's happening while the thing is running, while they're making a dyno run. He's got his finger in a hole, they're plugging the hole, and his finger's going, it's vibrating at a RPM that I cannot do manually because I can't make it go that fast. But it's really, really cool, and it shows these reflected waves, and it shows what's happening in real time. And so people can then go, oh wait, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And there really is, and it's something that people don't realize. When people talk to me about, especially after seeing it visualized so well, because he did such a great job, that people talk to me about things like port matching. Oh, it's going to disturb the airflow, and I'm like, you just have no idea like how much chaos is happening inside that port. You don't, it's easy to talk about individual things. Oh, it's taper, it's all these things, and you need to look at that. You need to watch that and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that that's going on. And I also can't believe that they did that they made a manifold like that and stuck their finger in it and ran it. And John was telling me about the safety plates that they made, because they're, you're standing next to a motor that's running on the dyno. And this was a big block Ford. And they also show all of the chaos that's happening with, two carburetors on their stuff. It's really, really cool. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend it. I'm sure that it's up there. I should ask John to get a copy of it and then do a video with it, because it's really, really interesting. I don't have any. I've never had a Truck Norris cam. Supercharged 350. I'd have to look specifically at what you're talking about. If you can tailor the cam timing to reduce back pressure, which usually happens by making more power. Well, I guess that's probably not the case, making less power. If you can reduce back pressure in the turbo, then you can probably help with detonation, because back pressure is going to manifest itself in temperature, and anything that you can do to bring the temperature down is going to be helpful. Or something close. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that cam. Anything in there is going to work the same. Not the same as that cam, because that has some valve events, some tricky valve events that Brian's done to make it work very well. But again, if you're talking about a turbo, the super cool cam that adds another 10 horsepower, that doesn't matter, because that's another half pound of boost, or a third of a pound, or whatever your NA starting point is. Stock 283 and street rod. So is this like a 240 or 50 horsepower motor? Probably a GT35, or actually a GT3076 might also work on that, because that thing doesn't make very much power. The 4.8 with the torque storm didn't surprise me at all. That did exactly what I expected it to do. Snafu is going from a 218 single pattern, 224 230. The 224 230 is going to make more power than that. It's going to shift power up a bit higher, especially because you're going from a big change in exhaust duration, which is going to help. And I think at a Cleveland, if that's got a stock head on it, it's probably going to help that. It is going to be a little bit softer down low than that cam, because the single pattern cam tends to be a little torqueier down low, and you have a milder version, and they're both on a 110. The video shows the what's going on inside a tunnel ram. Yeah, it is pretty chaotic. It's amazing that when you see that and you visualize that, because I think people visualize this idealistic version of what's happening like inside a tunnel ram. But when you look at that, after you see that, it's just like after you see slow motion video, like high speed stuff of valve trains. It's just amazing that a motor even works, that it keeps running. And then when you see what's going on in the tunnel ram, you're like, how does I'm surprised that we even get like the same, anywhere near the same air fuel in all of these cylinders. And I remember watching we had carburetors that have clear bowl covers on them at West Tech. And I remember watching during the dyno runs when I was doing Engine Masters, we tried some of those, because we're thinking, well, we need to have a uniform level of fuel, and it needs to be solid fuel, but it's not like that at all. When you watch what's going on, even on a stationary dyno like that, where you're not turning and doing all that stuff, and the fuel is flowing in past the needle and seat, it's all aerated fuel. It's like chaos in the bowl. And again, people don't realize that. They think that the bowl is just filled up with solid fuel. And then as it gets lower, more comes in and it just all stays solid. It's not like that at all. It's like chaos. There's all kinds of turbulence and aerated fuel going on. And again, how does the carburetor work with that sort of aerated fuel? And it works very well. Just do a search for John Kazi Engine Masters intake video. Because of you, I'd never be an NA guy. That's the thing. People think that there's that's a choice between NA and boosted, because when you're boosted, you have everything that NA has, unless it's high compression, dedicated, high RPM NA build. But most of them are not. So if you have a 6-liter with a cam in it, and then you add boost to that, there's no way that you can make a case that the all motor thing is better, unless you're just talking about, I'm just driving it around and I'm trying to get fuel mileage, or maybe I'm towing with it and I can't do the tune for the turbo thing or whatever, because you have everything that this one has, and then you have much more than that. Oh, I can't wait for the boost to come on. Well, in your NA motor, you're waiting forever for the boost to come on. So I never understood that argument. The 4.7 swap, the reason that they changed the firing order in the LS is for harmonics. It's to change frequency loading. It's not for, it wasn't for power. And when the guys, I haven't done it, I don't think directly on a 4.7 swap on the small block or a big block. The guys at West Tech had, and Steve said there's just not, that's not a power thing. Frank, John Kazi, it's Kaase, and Jon is his first name. I don't know of anybody in Northern California that can engine dyno these things. Yeah, I think they sold out of those cams. They're very popular. The intake valves do have carbon buildup on them, almost all of them, and not just GM's. All of the direct injection stuff. It's been fairly common. I'm thinking about hanging my Eden upside down and making a custom throttle body plenum. That would be interesting. I've always wondered if I remember asking Jim Bell about this, if we could flip the blowers upside down, not specifically his, but some of the Eaton stuff. I didn't know if, because we'd still have whatever level of oil that they have for the gears, and I wondered if that was okay, because then that would give you some leeway on how you could position them for custom applications. Brandon, you have a throttle body injected 454 and 90. That's a peanut port motor, hopeless, and just get a junkyard 6.0 transmission. A 6-liter in transmission would be a good upgrade for that motor. That motor, it's reasonably torquey, but not tremendously so. And the throttle body ultimately determines how much power you can make out of that thing. And it's not a lot, because there's not a lot of fuel flow. There's not a lot of airflow. If you just took the throttle body off and put a carburetor on it, if you could get away with that, if you're in an area that doesn't have smog for that particular vehicle. Otherwise, you know, a swap might be a good idea. Or you could put in a later, you know, a Gen 6 454. The Z06 talk was at the beginning. We were talking about whether people thought the NA version of that motor was going to be, how are guys going to feel if they get beat by the previous supercharged version that, like in the ZR1, made more power, and in the lower 650 horsepower version, was that an LT4, I think, made about as much power as that one did, but probably a lot more average power. Yeah, Morty, that's it. AETC video. Do diesels have the same problem with buildup on the valves as the gas motors do? We don't change the cam bearings on junkyard motors normally. Bank swears by air density. That's a good measurement. It just takes a lot more things into account. Strain TV, thank you very much. I don't know much about power adder, so I watch this channel. Listen, I'm an NA fan. I'm a power adder fan. It all works. I mean, the more power that you have NA, the more eventual power you're going to have under boost. So it's a good idea to learn about cylinder heads and camshafts and intake manifolds before you add boost. It just depends on how much power you want. I like the gear vendor stuff. A lot of the guys that do drag week are using those. Rob Zilla Garage. The Ford doesn't have a 670 horsepower naturally aspirated small block, right? Their Coyote doesn't make that in. Even the flat crank deal doesn't make that much power, right? Eric's question, Rich, what do you think about compound boosting? I have a couple of videos up on it. We ran turbo on turbo action, and then turbo on roots blower, and then also turbo on twin turbos on roots blower on a modular motor. So we've done that a number of times. Joshua, the thing that's going to determine the power output, and his question is how much power can an LQ4 with LS3 top end and twin GT45 turbos make? The GT45 turbos are going to determine how much power you can make. So you could make probably 1,500 with that. We have a test we need for an LPG HD Ford motor. I haven't run any LPG stuff. I don't know about PRI. I'm not going to SEMA. Yeah, Rob, they're both high RPM deals. Admiral, you're asking for an LS to do what? To run LPG on it? So, Tim, now you need to take your chicken and put it in the anti-microwave. Yeah, Joshua, those two GT45s, if all you're looking for is 1,000 horsepower, you should pick different turbos because you'll have turbos that'll be much more responsive than those two GT45s. Those things won't be terribly responsive because they have the capability to make a lot more power than you need. Two GT35s would probably be a better choice, or two S366s or something. And I'm sure Tim will chime in with what whole set turbos you need to run. I don't have any 392 FE videos. I don't have any FE videos that I can think of. I've only been involved in a couple of tests, and they're all been motors run by somebody else at Westech. I did an intake test, but I can't find the photos. Excuse me, can't find the photos. I did an intake manifold test with Robert Pond on one of his, I want to say it was an all aluminum, like 480-inch FE. And it was, I think we ran a dual plane, and then we ran a stack injection on it, which was kind of cool. And the stack injection picked up a lot of power, but I can't find all of the photos to make that video. So you want me to see how much static, how much static compression a 6-liter can run on liquid propane? That seems like it's going to be hard to do. So I'm going to have to run multiple kinds of pistons in it. That doesn't sound like a very fun test. It's not burnt chicken, it's Cajun style. What are the consensus of using a torque plate when honing an iron 6-liter LS? I don't know if when we had ours done, if they had a torque plate or not. We didn't do it on the junkyard motors. TJ, I'd like to send you a set of my custom ported CNC heads. What heads are they? Or is it an LS or a Coyote or a small block or big block? I think the LPG stuff will handle a lot of static compression if it's an NA motor. I just would like to get, I mean, we did a start video with LPG on the 4200 out there down the road, and it works fine. And he has a couple that would support, he has a couple mixers and stuff that will support a reasonable amount of power. I would just like to be able to run one on propane and have it work. That would be enough for me, not to find out whatever the maximum is. That would be, to me, that's the same as finding out what the maximum is on any kind of octane. And the only way that you can do that successfully is if you have knock sensor capability, and it tells you when you're getting to the point where it's a little bit too much, because you want to have it be not a lot too much. then the motor will tell you that with broken parts. But you want to get to something so you know before that, and that's a difficult deal. Is there a way to test how strong cylinder head bolts are? Yeah, that's a fairly, you can do a stretch test on them, and the guys at ARP do that. I doubt that you get to a point with the motor where the cylinder head bolt is the problem before something else is. Mike, I'm building LS3 soon. It has Texas speed 231, 243. Is this a good choice? Yes. On a 111, check and make sure that you have enough piston to valve clearance. I haven't looked. I haven't found a link on that, but I can try to do that maybe next time. Well, no, I'm saying if you have a 12 to 1 6-liter, I don't have anything that runs that kind of static compression. So you think the LPG will have a cooling effect, Admiral? Adam, which LT1 are you talking about? The latest one, or the Gen 2, or the Gen 1? Because they're all LT1s. But the latest one, you can run boost on them. You just have to get the tune right, and they definitely need ring gap. BTR Trek Norris cam. No holding her back cam. That's actually pretty clever. I like that. Shark City, there is a rule of thumb on how much power you get from raising compression. It's 3 to 4% per one full point of compression. So going from 9 to 1 to 10 to 1 should increase the power output by 3 to 4% of whatever your starting NA power is. It's not the turbo power, it's only the NA power. And like everything else, there's, in my opinion, there's a bell curve. So there's a sweet spot where you get the 3 to 4%. At really low compression or at really high compression, you don't get those kinds of gains. With your experience of not gapping rings, let's say on a 5.3, is there a certain amount of boost? No, everybody wants that. Well, if I run 10 pounds, would it be okay for me to not gap the rings? Yes, until it breaks. then it's not okay. Because it's not boost versus gap, it's temperature. So if you're on the throttle for a long time at 7 pounds of boost, you can break a ring. If you're right on the verge of detonation anyway, you can break a ring. If you have lots of back pressure, you can break a ring. So it's best to have the gap. So on these mixers, on these LPG mixers, what is liquid propane injected as? Does it change from a liquid to a gas as it's injected? Chris, South Australia. I like the guys over in Australia. Got lots of cool snakes. Got crocodiles. All kinds of cool stuff. And big sharks. .500 wheel horsepower is the ring cap level. How do you make it that's like making it a boost level. That doesn't make any sense. And I like what Matt does there. And maybe they've run lots of them at that level and it's worked out okay. But if you get 500 wheel horsepower from a D16 Honda motor, that's going to be out beyond the ring gap level. And then the ring gap level is going to be different on a 500 wheel horsepower 4.8 than it is on a 5.3 and the 6.0. And so you get my point. Let's see. I've seen a lot of guys run LPG, and I've seen it work. Obviously, Ack Miller had written tons and stuff about it, and so we know that it works. I just have never tried it. I've seen a lot of forklift stuff. So Caleb, I was going to use a ProCharger P1SC on a Saab 97X with a 5.3. The centrifugal supercharger is a little bit more friendly on gap than a turbo is because you make less torque. And so you're going to have less temperature because you're going to have less average boost, basically. And I know that I ran my Mustang for a long time, and with a Vortec on it, even running it at the Silver State wide open throttle for, I think it was at wide open throttle for 37 minutes. And then I lifted off and went through the narrows and back wide open throttle for whatever the length of time of, it was a total of 42 minutes and change, I think, or something like that. And I have no idea what the ring gap was. So maybe it was already enough. I know that we had put forged pistons in it, so I know that they had to fit the ring gap. I just don't remember what it was. And I honestly think that, and I have to go in 2 minutes. I honestly think that's why a lot of guys blew up a lot of the Dodge motors, a lot of the Hemis. They didn't have tuning for them, which is dumb, and they added boost and didn't change the ring gap. I love Jim Bell to death, but he's done that a lot. We want to see how much boost we can run with our blower on an untouched motor. I said that's a horrible idea, because he's talking about running 20 plus pounds of boost on an unopened motor with just the Bennett. I mean, having E85, which is a good idea, and having proper tuning and stuff, all that's a good idea. But you could get away with so much more, because eventually you just break a piston. And he did that on modular stuff, and he did that on Hemis, and he did it because he didn't put ring gap in them. Especially when you're trying to go to the most. If you're only running 7 pounds, then just go run 7 pounds, probably fine. But if you're trying to run 27 pounds, it's going to be a different thing. If modding a 5.3, it's important to add a baffle in the oil pan. I don't think that that's critical. Your pan should have some kind of baffle in it, right? How much is stroke worth? It's not a percentage. The best way to calculate that is figure out what the change in displacement is, and then if you could look at what your horsepower per displacement is, per cubic inch, per liter, however you want to multiply it, if you're comfortable with the metric system, and then what the new change is, and if you could keep it at that level, then you know how much more power you're going to make. What happens more often is that your specific output comes down with displacement, because if you have the same cam timing and the same intake and the same head flow, those things don't support the specific output at a higher displacement level than they did at the lower displacement level quite as well. So basically, on a 6-liter motor, it will want more cam to make the same specific output as a smaller cam does on a 5.3. One of the, and this will be the last thing I got to get going, one of the Australian 4-liter Barra motors had LPG, an aftermarket LPG setup on it. And, it was port injected, basically, LPG, which would be cool. I didn't know that. And when the people that bought the motor, because it belongs to somebody else, got the motor, or they got the motor, I picked the motor up. It had that on there, which was pretty cool. And apparently it's fairly common over there. So somebody was saying something about the Silver State that I wanted to talk about before I left. Oh, my sister lives at the starting line for the Silver State. Nice. Caleb, this will be the last comment. When I ran the Vortec on my supercharged Mustang, and remember, this is back in like FMU days and meters and the no standalone, no nothing. We ran a Vortec. It was only about 7 pounds or so. Sustained for, like I said, for a really long time. Okay, guys, thank you all for showing up. I'm going to put the video up on the big block power adder stuff. We got the same as the small block in the Ford. We got nitrous, we got blower, we got turbo stuff, twin turbo stuff, 2 cheap eBay turbos, which is everybody's favorite, as we know. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.